Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging hour discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, 𝗘𝗀𝗁𝗀, provides you with insight and guidance on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate. He also offers real estate...
Just a reminder, we are with you Monday through Friday from 3 to 4, the only live real estate show that runs daily in the entire Bay Area, and you could tune in and listen to us a couple different ways. One is on the radio at 𝗘𝗀𝗹 1220 AM. You can also listen to us live online if you go to 𝗘𝗀𝗹.biz. And most importantly, we have the podcast now. We'd love to have you download the podcast and follow us anywhere. That way you can listen to us at any time. We realize not everyone has the luxury of listening from 3 to 4, so that's why the podcast is so important. You can go to iTunes, Stitcher, Podcast, Pocket Cast, all those, or you could just go to our website at RERadiolive.com, and you could download the podcast and listen to it anywhere we go, or you go, I should say. We are a live show. We love your calls and your questions. A couple different ways you could interact with us today. One is the toll-free 800 number, 1-800-516-1220, or the popular text line, 408-838-9060. Most of you know, if you've been following the show for the last 4.5 years, the focus, the objective here is education and information. We work really hard to have great guests like I have today, good content information to pass on to you, the consumer, to help you make wise decisions on your real estate, in and around real estate, no matter what it is. So let me invite my guest in today. She's a return visitor, Miss Rainey Hake. She's an Executive Vice President and COO with Alain Pinel Realtors. Welcome back, Rainey.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you here. You're fresh now from the big trips. We're going to talk a little bit about your travel and the market and international, so I'm excited to have you back, and a lot of good information. Looking forward to it. And I'll remind those, too, next Tuesday we have our Mixer series are kicking off. We have those February through November of 2016, and Alain Pinel Realtors will be our guest that day, so we'll be welcoming them there. And if you want to come and visit, more information is at RERadiolive.com, but that's at the Toll House Hotel in Los Gatos. We're really excited to have not only industry professionals come out, but consumers as well. Come and introduce yourself. We'd love to see you. Rainey, why don't we get started? Tell us a little bit about your background and then your primary roles and responsibilities with Alain Pinel.
Yes, thank you. I've been in real estate for over 20 years now, with Alain Pinel Realtors for over 13. I'm the COO of the company. We're the 5th largest residential real estate company in the nation, the #1 independent in California. My role and background actually grew through brand strategy, but sort of fell into real estate like most people do and never was able to fall back out of it. So I run all the day-to-day operations for all 33 offices and 1,400 agents.
Yeah, you have quite a job. And a great reputation. We're going to talk more about the things that are going on, but some of the exciting stuff that I'm really interested in hearing, and I know the consumers are too, is your recent visit to China and some of the the economy over in China. So if you could share with us a little bit about your visit, maybe also the intent of the visit. What was the strategy and the objective of the visit for Alain Pinel?
Of course, we've been traveling internationally quite a bit for several years now. This last year we were in London, Berlin, as well as Vancouver, and then most recently in Shanghai, Beijing, and Hong Kong. The purpose for traveling so much is building relationships, but also learning culturally and economically regarding business practices that impact the local Bay Area economy and housing market. And more specifically, in our recent trip to China, we uncovered a lot of information about consumer behavior, and then also were able to observe and learn from our financial advisors and real estate practitioners regarding the Chinese stock market, economy, and consumer, I would say, palate for still really being hungry to invest locally here in the Bay Area and in the United States generally, specifically regarding real estate.
Yeah, and that's the reason why this is so important. I know you gave a brief summary, but for those listeners here is that someone might say, well, geez, that's a lot of international travel for a real estate company that has a great reputation here in the Bay Area in California. So is the importance because you can't ignore basically the global economy we have, and there's buyers coming over here, relocation situations. So you have to be part of that if you want to be a big player overall.
Correct. We are obviously a dominant player in the local marketplace, but we're finding increasingly, especially on the peninsula and other parts of the San Francisco Bay Area, that a large percentage, up to 30% sometimes during the year, we're having international buyers coming in. And when you've got that large of a percentage of your buyers coming internationally, it's extremely important to be able to understand what matters to them, their buying preferences, and also how we can leverage that information for our sellers who are here local.
Very good. So how would you rate the trips? You're doing a lot of traveling. I mean, I'm sure it's certainly just an educational process, getting to meet people, building relationships, really figuring out how you could work better together across the seas here. Was it a success, the trip? I mean, overall, would you consider it?
Absolutely. We always learn new things. For instance, this time, there's a lot of talk in the media these days here locally regarding the Chinese real estate market and the stock market and how that economy is globally affecting all of the markets around the world. And what I found while I was traveling was that there's not only a lot of wealth still in China, a mass of wealth, but also there's still a continued desire by the wealthy to be investing outside of China, specifically in the United States for particular reasons, one of which is in China they have what's called a leasehold, where we have freehold, and that simply just means that in the United States you actually own the land that your home is on, where in China the government owns the land, and there is still somewhat of a distrust regarding long-term investments and the ability for the Chinese government to seize that property, especially as they're trying to urbanize more and more of the marketplaces over there. So for that and other lifestyle reasons, there's still a lot of investment opportunities out there for Chinese nationals who are looking to move to the United States for investment and lifestyle purposes.
Very good. If you're just tuning in, again, this is Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. We're with you 5 days a week. Today we're joined in studio for the entire hour with Rainey Hake. She's the Executive Vice President and COO of Alain Pinel Realtors. We're talking about the market in general, but the visits internationally Rainey and the team has made over the last year, and bringing some of that information back and explaining to us and our consumers really why it's so important. So when we see in the media, Rainey, the stock market in Japan and China and some of the issues, we should already assume automatically that, boy, this means buying's going to stop. This means there's not going to be any more activity over here from China and Asia. Not at all, right? We shouldn't assume that. It's a whole different dynamic here. Correct.
One dynamic that's interesting in comparison is in China, a lot of the Chinese citizens do not what I'll call play the stock market like we do here in the United States. So when their stock market fluctuates, that doesn't really affect the individual wealth of the consumers who are also still looking to buy.
Okay.
They prefer buying hard assets like real estate versus necessarily stocks or bonds in the local marketplace. So in that, they have quite the appetite to be looking for solid investment in countries like the United States who have a reputation for having safe holds for investments like real estate.
Yeah. Are the buying habits, maybe you could share a little bit about the buying habits. Are we to assume that the buying habits are high-end homes with good schools, commercial property, land, or is it across the board?
All of the above, but for different reasons, and understanding the different reasons I think is important. So you do have a rising middle class with wealth. You have the one-child home where you've got a generational amount of people who are saving up their money to then move to the United States, let's say near Stanford University, to purchase a home. That's a common case that we've talked about before. Now, in addition to that, you also have investors who have taken advantage of programs in place. For instance, there's a current program called 𝗥𝗲𝗋𝗊, which allows international investors to come into the United States and purchase real estate. There's a new program that's going to be launching later this year called 𝗥𝗲𝗎𝗊2, which is just an expansion of that's going to loosen up the regulations that have been in place that have been limiting consumers to convert money from the Chinese dollar into the American dollar. That has been loosened up by the government because they're no longer concerned about the inflation that the Chinese government was previously concerned about. So in doing that, even though the stock market is having issues, you're still seeing investors now having more opportunity to invest and still having the desire to do so. So you're going to see a lot more investors coming in addition to those lifestyle buyers who are looking for educational purposes for their children and the next generation. And then you still have those uber wealthy high-end buyers who are buying for status symbols, which is similar to what we saw with a lot of people coming in from Russia and other parts of Europe and Asia previously. So you have different types of buyers who have different motivations, and they're purchasing in different locations and areas. But in most cases, you do see a preference toward new construction.
Okay.
In China, there's not this concept of property maintenance where you remodel and upgrade your home. We hold on to homes and put money back into the homes. They'll just tear them down or buy a new house. So they're like, oh, you sell used homes in the United States? We're like, well, it's not like a used car. They're well maintained. So there's a lot of education that goes into how to, market a property internationally when people are like, why would I spend multiples of millions of dollars to buy a used home?
But isn't that interesting just to hear you talk about this in your visit and the understanding? This is exactly why you make those trips. Your company's committed to that, to understanding and building relationships with different cultures, because you have to.
You have
right?
to.
I mean, we shouldn't assume, and this is why it's so important. This new program you spoke of, any idea how kind of impact? Is it going to have a significant impact, do you think, on potential additional buyers here?
I do. I think that Canada had a program in place up until about 2014, and you saw the Vancouver and other marketplaces just soar with huge investments coming over from China. So the United States a couple of years ago expanded their EB-5 program, and now that with China's government opening up their QDII-2 program, you're going to see people who are now empowered with the ease of moving money, which has been the biggest hurdle for why I think it's been as slow as it has been. So while you might have some economic concerns, I think that the movement of money with ease is going to encourage those who still have the money to make the move. So I think you're going to continue to see, if not steady investment, probably an increase in that investment. And I don't think it's going to be massive, but I don't think it's going to be the downturn that some people are speculating.
Yeah. Is there? We're gonna take a break here in just a minute, and we'll continue this. But on the other side, there's a continued interest, regardless. I mean, they're fully aware of the limited amount of inventory, I guess. But I guess that could even mean, dare I say, higher prices. So we'll talk about that and a little much more when we come back. All right, we're going to have to take a quick break. We come back. If you have any questions, again, we're joined today for the entire hour by Rainey Hake. She's the Executive Vice President and COO of Alain Pinel Realtors. If you have any questions, 408-838-9060. This is Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. We'll be back to continue in just a couple of minutes.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com.
Good afternoon, Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. We're joined for the entire hour in studio by Rainey Hake. She's the Executive Vice President and COO of Alain Pinel Realtors, returning to give us an update as we kick off 2016 about some of the international markets. And before we took a break on the first segment, you're talking, Rainey, a little bit about the lifestyle, some of the lifestyle factors, if you wanted to finish up a little bit and explain some of the things, again, that people may not understand here of the inner workings of overseas.
Of course, one of the things that I most noticed on my most recent trip when I was in Beijing, you actually get to experience the smog and the water quality and some of the things that they're dealing with on a regular basis. And you notice, as I'm sitting next to my translator and driver, she got a text from the government saying, okay, you don't get to drive your car tomorrow or the next day. There's these rotating days for the next week. They had all the schools closed down. The government buildings are closed down. That's a regular occurrence for them. It's not something that's, super, unusual.
Right.
And driving through the center of Beijing, you're looking at these shacks, and I'm asking, well, how much would you pay to be there? They're like, it's like $4,000 per square foot. Now that's, equivalent to a luxury apartment in San Francisco. So when you think about they're walking in with these suitcases of cash, and how can they afford that? Relatively, for the lifestyle that you get to live here in the Bay Area and all of the benefits of that, you no longer have the smog and pollution and, the traffic. We drove from one of our affiliates' offices to a restaurant. It took 45 minutes. You could have walked there in 15. Wow. It's just dead stop. So there's so many benefits, and it's almost a bargain to be purchasing here in the Bay Area.
It's amazing to think a bargain.
I know.
But that's the way they're thinking for sure. Before we talk a little more about consumer behavior, Is the focus again, if I'm looking at the multiple different real estate companies that operate in and around the United States, specifically to the Bay Area here, you guys are known as a high-end real estate company. You've got a great reputation. What is the? Do you think that this focus and the time that you spend over there is mainly because you don't want to lose out on that type of a market share, or in general, regardless of what kind of real estate level or business you're in, should you be really building relationships overseas so that you better understand those buying habits?
It's twofold for us. So obviously we represent buyers and sellers, and we have to do so effectively and responsibly. So in order to, obviously capture the buyers who are coming in internationally, it's great to have relationships, and so we go abroad to build those. But in building those relationships, we're also able to get real exposure for our properties in a global level. And what I mean by that is a lot of companies just use the internet and put information out there. And what we're finding is consumer behavior with international buyers is much different than it is for domestic buyers. So here in the United States, most people start their search online. NAR does their study every year. It comes back year after year. We find that while people might go online to do research, they're very leery about being able to trust that information.
Interesting.
So they are first and foremost looking for a trusted advisor. And so they're going to their local contacts saying, well, who do you know? And so what we need to do is build relationships with the people who are being asked, who do you know? So I'm not going over there necessarily to build relationships with individual consumers. I'm building relationships with real estate professionals, professional services. And then so I'm getting information that my sellers can use back here, and I'm gaining exposure for those properties to the people who really need to be able to see those properties. So it's a much more targeted approach. And I think that building relationships is, in many regards, what real estate is about, but what business is about. And so I do think that it's applicable to not just to real estate, but across the board, and not just to a large brokerage like Alain Pinel, but to even a small mom and pop who want to create a network of affiliates, making those targeted efforts to understand who their buyers are, where they're coming from, and who is in the know and who they need to talk to. Yeah,
that's well said. I think that's perfectly said. So we'll have to take another break in a minute or so, and I want to get more into detail about consumer behavior. You started to touch on a little bit about the differences. So when we come back, we'll talk more about that, because it'll be interesting to find out the differences. And we're focused a lot, I think, U.S., or I should say you would say Zillow, going online to get the searches, but it's quite different in overseas in different places outside of the United States. So that's unique in a way for sure. We'll give the information out again. Before we take the break, if someone wants more information about the job that you do, or more research here, or maybe looking for an agent to work with, what's the best place a consumer could go to find out more about Alain Pinel?
𝗟𝗡𝗋.com is our website. All of our information is there, but you can always contact me directly at Rainey@𝗟𝗡𝗋.com. Okay,
very good. All right, we're going to take another quick break. When we come back, if you have any questions for Rainey, this is a great topic, very informational. We're talking about, when we come back, we're going to talk more about consumer behaviors and how they interact, and much more. If you want to talk, give us a call, 1-800-516. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon. Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. We're joined in studio for the entire hour with Rainey Hake. She is the Executive Vice President and COO of Alain Pinel Realtors. Talking about international, China, some of the developments, some of the culture. We're going to, Rainey is going to talk a little bit about consumer behavior and much more. And just real quickly, again, for a reminder for those that would like to come out and join us next Tuesday on February 2nd, we have our first 2016 mixer, and Alain Pinel will be our guest that day. Come out and join us. 3 to 4 is a live radio show, and then 4 to 6 is the mixer. We'd love to see you, meet you on out. It's at the Toll House Hotel in Los Gatos. So, Rainey, maybe you could, I know we touched on continue a little bit about some of the consumer behavior, and maybe draw a visual for those as we get underway. Yeah,
I think it's sort of interesting to maybe put in perspective in comparison to how properties are marketed in the United States in terms of how they're received by the consumer. So in the United States, there's a lot of trust with the information that's on the internet, and even in the advertising that we do. So it's really easy for us to lead with, here's a beautiful property. It's located in this wonderful area. Here's this established agent who works for this great brokerage. And there's sort of that top-down pyramid where you start with the property and you end with just the support of the brokerage. When marketing internationally, especially in China, there's more distrust about the information that they're finding online. So we're finding that's much more impactful for us to lead with. We are a well-established brand, top luxury real estate brokerage. Really sell your resume first as the bottom part of the pyramid. You start with the foundation. And so that converse pyramid of the brokerage, then you talk about the relationship with the established agent, then you talk about what area they might be interested in, and you end with finding them the property. So just those nuances of how you understand how to work with the consumer, I think is really important to understand. Because if you lead with the property, you will oftentimes not convert that individual because they're going to have distrust and they're not even going to understand the value of that individual listing because they don't understand the area or the agent they're working with.
That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. So am I to take that to assume or not to assume that, but they're driven or led by relationships or who they're dealing with first and foremost?
Trust is very important, and so that's where an established relationship comes into play to solve that problem.
So they're going to look at that before they even look at that big, beautiful estate or home or wherever they're thinking about buying.
Correct, because they don't know that beautiful home is real or that you're actually selling it and that it could be a scam and that you're going to take all their money. And so before they find that home on Zillow and just, buy sight unseen, they're doing that. They're buying sight unseen, but with people that they know and that there's some sort of established relationship with or referral of somebody who's either here or back in China who has connected them with somebody that they can trust.
That's great. We're going to take a break here in a bit. This is a short segment, but so this is why it's so important. You're really putting the pieces together here. This is why it's so important for the trips, the relationships, developing, understanding the different cultures as you're talking about some of the consumer behaviors, and that if you really want to do business with some of the international buyers, selling, buying, you really have to understand. Yes.
It's just like marketing in any regard. You always have to understand your end target user. And in this regard, you really just have to expand your horizons to understand the global consumer.
And I guess we'd also have to be careful, right? Not to assume, but just to sometimes really listen attentively and understand instead of put really what we think and we believe. That's where it becomes really important.
And I think that is the first thing that most people tend to do is they take their assumptions and they put them forward as fact. And you learn by listening that what you assume is fact is not necessarily, and that's where the greatest growth and relationships are built.
Well said. All right, we're going to come back, take a quick break. Again, a few more segments left here with Rainey Hake. She's the Executive Vice President and COO of Alain Pinel Realtors. If you have any questions, 1-800-516-1220, or you could text 408-838-9060. We'll continue in just a couple minutes.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Welcome back to Real Estate.
Here and having a great time having a conversation with Rainey Hake. She is the Executive Vice President and CEO of Alain Pinel Realtors, and just gathering a lot of great information. I was telling her off air, and just learning and educating. One of the things I enjoy the most about this show and interviewing people is that you just learn and learn and learn and learn. It's just great. And you always pick up something, it seems like, every day. Even though you listen to a lot of stuff, there's always little things. And so for this show, I'm picking up a lot.
Great.
So it's really good. I can imagine the consumers are soaking it up, I hope. And so we'll continue to get that out. So let's talk a little bit about, so once the buyers, come here, maybe some of their preferences, the international buyers. What do you see, and maybe some of the trends and some of the things that you want to talk about on that side?
Of course, I was mentioning to Joe that, China is actually having a really hard time filling the homes over in China. They've got a bunch of empty houses. And so the government is focusing on an urbanization plan to foster consumption. We're really trying to attract people to move from the country into the more urban areas. You look at cities like Shanghai, where you've got these big high-rises. 15 or 20 years ago, those were marshes where all those big high-rises are today. So the Chinese economy is growing very fast. Wealth is being amassed at a very high rate, yet you still see consumer behavior being focused not necessarily on purchasing domestically, but purchasing internationally. So once they get here to the States, and particularly they're looking at California, the San Francisco Bay Area, LA, even San Diego, the lifestyle things that they're looking for that we mentioned are important. But once they are here, we're finding that international buyers are also purchasing above the median home price. That doesn't mean that when we're marketing to them, we lead with the luxury, because we actually find that, when you're dealing with, Chinese buyers sometimes as well, there's negotiation that happens. And so if you say, here, I've got like a $2 million property, or they'll come in and say I've got no budget. And it's like, well, everybody has a budget. Everybody has a budget, except maybe Google. But everybody has a budget. And so it's really, we found that leading with more of the mid-priced homes, so the $700,000 or $800,000 homes, attracts them. And then you actually find out what their wants and needs are, and you do a needs assessment, and then they actually end up buying maybe a $2 million home. But if you lead with the $2 million home, they don't always know that that's what they're looking for, and they don't grasp onto it. So there's a lot of psychology behind understanding how to start that relationship up front, but knowing that on average they do buy at a higher rate than the state average, obviously, but even our local averages and median prices. And then on top of that, you're also you're seeing people coming in with all cash, and they're purchasing homes at a quicker rate. That has a lot to do with the restrictions that they have for purchasing for financing. So obviously, it's not necessarily a preference, but it's a limitation due to the ability to receive a mortgage. There are some mortgage programs out there, but they're far and few between. But we are actually seeing more of a preference for people to come in, purchase, sometimes get visas out of some of these programs, and then actually do a reverse mortgage and pull money out and then reinvest in other areas. So you're seeing multiple investment coming from one entry-level property. So these are multiple buyers. So understanding that relationship and the long-term investment that you have with a single customer and client. And then we already talked a little bit about how their preference is more around new construction, purchasing homes near universities, near lifestyle. Wineries are really important. People come in thinking, asking, I want to be in San Francisco, but oftentimes they don't really know what that means, and they end up buying in other areas. And there's a lot of new construction happening all around the Bay, and so understanding how to position those and market them properly.
Is it, Rainey, is it mostly also the areas in California, or when you just described, that are pretty strong business centers as well? I guess what I'm saying is, are they interested in Carmel, Monterey, some of the places like that too, or is it mostly the focus around the area of business, schools, activities, and that type of thing? Yeah,
as I mentioned, there's various types of consumers, and each of them have different attributes. So you have a lot of people who are coming in wanting to purchase in Carmel, the wine country. It's not as prevalent as what we're seeing. I would say Palo Alto, 25% of, I would say, the people who are coming here from China are specifically looking for more something like the Palo Alto area. So a whole quarter of them. And then the rest of them are sort of sporadically spread throughout the Bay. So San Francisco also being high on that list. But the wine country and Carmel are high on the list in terms of that lifestyle approach. Wine and being a connoisseur of fine things and fine shopping are also things on the lifestyle list.
Very good. So anything else on that side before we move along a little bit? I mean, there's so much in this. What is the outlook for 2016? Do you see? I mean, we talked about the new program, even more growth, even more international activity. The same as last year. How do you see that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be fairly steady as it was in 2015. I think we're going to see a slight uptick. I think 2014 was probably the highest, and you saw a little bit of a downturn in 2015. I think it's not much, but a slowdown. I think you're going to see some steady investment coming in 2016. And I also think that, people are understanding it better, and they're getting control over how they're communicating and marketing themselves. You were talking before about other real estate companies or businesses. I think it's important to understand how to be effective in this market. We learned that, we're not necessarily a big franchise company or Fortune 500 where we have our name in every single country, but we want to be able to attract consumers here to just in the local Bay Area. We did so by strategically aligning ourselves with the most effective resources. We're members of leading real estate companies of the world and Luxury Portfolio. That gave us connections in 60 different countries immediately. But even on top of that, we still went to go visit people in China, created relationships with like HomeLink, the largest real estate company there. It's those individual relationships that any individual company can go and create, whether they're traveling abroad or not. Yeah,
and that's the largest real estate company, HomeLink,
correct,
over there?
They are.
Okay, got it. All right, we're going to take our last break here in a bit. When we come back, we're going to finish up. If you have any questions, give us a call, 1-800-516-1220, or you could always text 838-9060. Again, this is Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live, and we have one more segment with Rainey Hake. She's the Executive Vice President and COO with Alain Pinel Realtors. We'll be back to finish up in just a couple of minutes.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com.